He's the deal lawyer, and he's the certified coach. Find out what happens when these two professionals talk about universal questions and topics that require insightful answers. This week, the guys meet to talk about. This episode starts now.
And we are talking about the topic, 3 reasons why running your mouth about politics can destroy or improve your business, career, or a negotiation. And the reason why we're talking about this topic is right now we got a big issue coming up. With Anthony Kennedy retiring from the Supreme Court, everybody is thinking about what is going to happen with respect to the new Supreme Court nominee. And people, this is near and dear to everyone's heart. And so what people are thinking is, what should we do? What am I thinking about this? And it's very sensitive to each and every one of us. And so then we're thinking, well, I might want to talk about this. And so when we start talking about these kind of topics, obviously it's very near and dear to one another's hearts, and we don't all agree on it. And it could, in some cases, it could hurt you talking about some of these topics. At the same token, if you don't talk about it, it could also hurt you.
Yeah, it almost seems like you're caught in a catch-22. But I think what it really boils down to is we got to start looking at why are we having this conversation? What are we really trying to get across? And I'm sure today we'll talk a lot more about that.
Yeah, and so, but part of the thing is there's winners and losers in some of these issues, right? When we're talking about politics.
Yeah.
And so, for example, if a nominee is put on there and they're opposed to Roe v. Wade, well, that is something that's significant to many people.
Yeah.
Or let's think about this, the national anthem, whether or not someone should stand or not. Well, everybody knows that that is, at this point in time, something extremely, extremely a sensitive topic. And there are people who can't even quarterback anymore right now in the league because they felt so strongly about it, and they took a stand, or not a stand, if you will. Well,
it's amazing to see how people are framing the arguments too, because you have one side saying this is about X, and the other side's going, it's not about that at all. It's about this over here. And so they can't even agree on where the starting point is in the conversation.
Exactly. And then think about this also, the Red Hen restaurant last week out in Virginia.
Yeah.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders goes to eat, and lo and behold, the owner comes up and says, hey, we need you to exit out of here. Took a stand. And so was it right to do that? Was it wrong? Or, what are we talking about here? And so that's why I thought, and we thought it was extremely important and a timely discussion topic to talk about how talking about politics can destroy your business, or it can improve your business. And so there's a flip side of it as well. And by the way, everybody tuning in, please send us your comments. This is something that's interactive, and we want everybody to take part in this. And we don't have all the answers, and we might have some things wrong too. So please chime in. And we see you commenting and everything. We thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
And so that's how we want to tee it up today: is 3 reasons why running your mouth about politics can destroy or improve your business, career, or negotiation. And I'll just jump right in. I'll give one of the first reasons, and this is how it could hurt you, right? We'll talk about that first. Number 1, it could isolate you from your peers at work and make you appear different.
Yeah. Well, if we're talking about not trying to be isolated, if we're talking about trying to be this gregarious society where everybody is trying to get along, the first thing we find out is while that may sound great, the differences are what's going to decide who we are and where we're going to go and what we believe. And then you got to understand, why do you believe this? Why do you hold on to this? Are you holding on to it for a good reason? Because you'll have some people who will argue and tell you, hey, maybe what Hitler did wasn't that bad.
Oh,
I've heard people try to make that argument.
Wow.
So again, how are we framing this, and what are we getting at? What are we thinking? Why are we so locked in?
And so I'm looking. Brian Williams, he said, I believe it's a bad move. That should be a topic discussed after several meetings with a particular person. And so that's a great point. So with respect to how it could be bad,
yes.
When we're talking about isolating, people want to build rapport with one another. And so when we come out and talk about something that is obviously different, maybe different from your peer or your counterpart, it causes a destruction of that rapport.
Yes.
And it could cause people to not want to discuss openly with you.
Yes.
And so it could, if you're in a negotiation, that may cause the negotiation to go downhill. It's very likelihood. It could also, if you're a business owner, it may, or even an owner of a business, your coworkers may not feel necessarily as comfortable talking to you because now they know that maybe you have this certain type of belief. And so that's where you're not building the rapport. In fact, you may be causing a destruction of rapport.
Yeah. So you're trying to imagine, how is what I'm about to say about to be charitable? I mean, I think that's what you should be saying beforehand, because
Okay.
you're either burning bridges or you're building them, right?
Right.
And everybody hears that analogy a lot, but it's true. When you speak, you almost have to ask yourself, is what I'm about to say to be harmful or is it about to be helpful? And
Yes.
sometimes you're doing both at the same time.
Right.
But you're pushing people, you're pushing limits every time that you get into something like this. And so, yeah, I'm with you on that. I think it's important to understand, first of all, like you said it before, what are my goals in getting into this conversation? Am I getting into this conversation just because I want to argue, because I want to be right? Well, I can already tell you how that's going to go down. But if you're saying, I'm going to get into this conversation because I really want to understand how Brian thinks, or I want to understand how Susan thinks, or so-and-so thinks,
Yeah.
then I can see where there's profit in it. But right now I know we're talking about why it's not.
Yeah, why it can hurt you, why it can hurt you. Number two, it may cause an alienation with your client base.
Yeah.
And so let's go back to the Red Hen restaurant, for example. I think there are some, if you recall, the reason why the owner went out there and talked to Sarah Huckabee Sanders is because her employees, they were opposed to some of the positions that Ms. Huckabee Sanders communicates about.
Sure.
And so that's the reason why she approached her and said, hey, we want you to leave. Well, her client base is something completely different. And now I don't know exactly what her client base is, but I think also by the fact that it's called Red Hen Restaurant, I think that made Sarah Huckabee Sanders think it was okay to go there. That's what I do think. I do think that. Okay. But on the flip side, what we have seen, there are right now people protesting right in front of that restaurant today protesting. And so when we are communicating about very sensitive political issues, we have to understand who our client base is and what they are expecting of us. And so if we are not sure about that, well, you're going to find out afterwards once you do the communicating. And so that's something to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, I think, I keep going back to this, but I think it's so apt. It's like, what are you trying to do? I mean, what is the whole point of it? Now, I can understand from a business perspective, you're trying to be, I guess when you're in a capitalist society, the idea is that you, by default, want to be better to people because you want to bring people in because, again, all you care about is making that revenue.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, people also take stands to things. People care about certain things. And then, but what if those people are also some of the same people who come in and patronize your restaurant. So you can almost look at the situation and say, I can see where this would be a huge problem, but it also lends to an opportunity. Right.
Right. We're not talking about opportunities right now.
I know. But it's like, because the juicy part is there. People want, wants to jump in and say, well, this is wrong and that's bad. This is wrong, and I'm just trained not to do that right off the bat. But instead to just look at it and say, I can admire the position because it's usually during stuff like this that we actually learn more things about human nature and about people.
Yeah. And we talked about this, you talked about this a little earlier. A lot of times when we do make these communications and everything, what we do find out is that a lot of us will go straight to the comment section. And
Hey, Sean.
And some of us get a lot of joy out of that.
Yeah.
I have to confess, there are times where if I see something communicated on Facebook or Instagram and it's something controversial, I'm going to look at the post, but I might go directly down to the comment section and see what people are saying. Yeah. And people just get kind of raw there. And so
they do. Well, it's here again. If in the office I'm afraid to talk about politics because everyone says don't talk about politics and religion, and we could also add race, gender, and 5 other boxes to that.
Yeah.
Then that's going to come out somewhere, especially if you're passionate. So it turns out I can't talk about it at work, sitting next to you, because you might have a different viewpoint, and we might get into an argument, and I might get fired, or the boss might think differently of me if I'm on the opposite side of my boss.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do? you're going to then get on your computer and then you're going to go ahead and start talking to the people that are out there. You really start saying it because your name is 776 Viper and nobody knows who you are.
Yeah. Well, good morning, everybody who are just joining in. So I just want to bring you up to speed what we're talking about. We're talking about 3 reasons why running your mouth about politics can destroy or improve your business, career, or a negotiation. That's what we're talking about. And we talked about 2 reasons why it could destroy or hurt you.
Yes.
The third reason that I want to bring up is it could cause embarrassment to you and your organization. So one thing is it's one thing to talk about a topic and be on point and hopefully the masses agree with what you are talking about. But there's always the opportunity where you could be completely wrong, and you can have thousands and thousands of people who are completely and utterly on the opposite side of you, and in fact your belief, your political belief it may be, could be so adverse it will cause complete and utter embarrassment to your organization, and that's the risk. That is one of the risks.
Yeah, and I think, and that's the thing too, because sometimes when people will spot out, and I see we got some people showing up here, so I'm going to read some of this.
Yes,
I'm sure you're going to do the same thing. I think when people start spouting, the main thing is you want to make sure that if you say this, how committed are you to it? Because it's not going away. It'll be now stamped.
That's exactly right.
Anybody can go back and check it later on and see.
That's
so
right.
if you say some really horrible things about, say, women, and then you get indicted for something that has to do with women,
that's right.
They're going to look up your
right.
social media feed and they'll go, wow, look at how many uncharitable things he said about women. We can believe that he's done so-and-so and so-and-so.
Yes.
So there's also that it's just completely not smart, knowing in the age of where we are now, where everything's being recorded. You really need to start thinking about what is it that I'm really trying to say.
That's right.
Because that embarrassment is also something that's also entrapment.
That's right.
To be used against you. So.
That's right. So a lot of comments coming through here.
Yes.
Miss Linhart saying, I do want to make statements or post memes that push people to think. And so
I like that.
Yeah. And so part of this, when we are communicating about these sensitive subjects, it's getting people to think. And there's nothing wrong with that, because
right.
I think over there, Sean Presley, what is it?
And so Sean Presley saying, open communication is key, but allowing others to have their own opinion is also important.
And then I got another comment here. With the Huckabee situation, it was to eat. Regardless of your political stance, you should allow a person to dine. Hey, let me tell you something. I love to eat. And I want to be able to go to some of my favorite restaurants and not have an issue with that. Hey, everybody's like, yeah, we want to eat. That's right. Food is good. And so, you got to be careful about that. The civil rights movement taught us that. This might cross the line on the dollar. Yeah. So there's a lot of sensitive, we're really being, in a dangerous situation when we start, taking positions in certain kind of, especially something we're eating, anything that life, things you're trying to sustain your life, and we're kind of in some way prohibiting people from taking part in that. That's a dangerous situation when we get into that.
Well, right, and didn't we have signs that used to tell us before who could go where and what? And so again, you also have to think about the history. You have to look at the context of a lot of these things too. And so I think anybody who's just speaking out of the moment, while you may want to educate, while you may want to meme somebody, also remember that if you don't look at the historical context of what you're saying, you could really be saying something that has a lot of injury.
Lenore Kelson just said, yes, please don't stop me from eating. Yeah. So I think we're kind of getting a poll here. Maybe the Red Hen restaurant, while I understand where they're coming from, but a lot are saying that's probably potentially crossing the line. We don't know. And I'd be curious to see how the business is doing and everything. And I'm all about courage and taking a stand as well and everything. So let me make sure I'm real clear on that. We talked about how it could destroy your business. So let's flip the coin on this and let's look at the other side. Right. How it could potentially benefit your business, a career, or a negotiation. Number one, it could in fact create rapport with your colleagues or clients.
That's correct. If you take a stand on something, right? And your clients or colleagues are thinking kind of the same thing. What you've done now is you've kind of created a little bit of solidarity. So that actually can be a very good thing.
Yeah. And so in a negotiation, let's go from there. One of the things I like to talk about is making small talk, and small talk is actually big talk. And what I mean by that is that when you are first meeting somebody, it is real important to build rapport with them. And what I mean by that is make them feel as if, and I'm not trying to be manipulative or anything like that, but make them feel as if y'all are similar. You have goals that are common. And so you quickly want to try to find topics or whatever it may be that allows the other person to feel like, hey, we're similar. Yes. And we're like one another. And so when you build rapport, it causes people to like you. It causes people to open up. And if you're in a negotiation, it allows the negotiation to go a little more smooth. I mean, it's just a fact. And so it's something very important to think about. And when you are communicating about a subject where you have other colleagues that believe in the same thing, that's where you get rapport.
That's right. That's where movements get started, right?
That's right.
So
that's
when
right.
you have the sit-ins, when you go back to the 60s and what Martin Luther King Jr. was doing, you look at what Rosa Parks did, all of that created a ripple. And when it creates a ripple for a good thing, and other people see that you were willing to stand up for it. I mean, because think about it, there were other people who thought what was going on in the 60s was wrong.
Right.
Not everybody stepped up and did something about it.
That's right. That's right.
So when someone does step up and when someone does talk about something controversial, what you might do is you might find the other allies.
That's right. That's right. And that's really important to note. And we got two more here, and we're now on the how running your mouth about politics can improve your business, your career, or negotiation. Okay, number two. It could display consciousness that causes clients to flock to your business.
Yes, that's right.
So about 3, 4, or 5 weeks ago, maybe a month or two ago, Ellen's restaurant here in Dallas, I guess the NRA was in town, and they posted a certain type of communication related to the NRA being in town. Controversial, but what happened? Their restaurant was filled with people. People came in because they took a stand and community. Now they got some hate mail as well and everything, but they displayed some consciousness and some courage on a topic that many of us, it's very important to us.
Yes.
Gun control, one way or the other.
Yes.
And so it's a very controversial subject matter, but what they did is they took a stand and people rewarded them with that.
That's exactly right. And if you remember, this also happened a few years back with Troy Cathy with Chick-fil-A, where there was going to be supposedly a boycott because of his beliefs on what he thought about marriage. And instead, it turns out they sold more chicken sandwiches that day when everybody was going to boycott them for being hate mongers and hate speech, whichever. And instead, it did just the opposite. So that's exactly a point to your point number two, because at the end of the day, and this goes back to food again. What is it with food? Right? There's our commonality. See, there's the universality there. It has to be about food. If we get us all together about food, we'll probably talk about anything.
Yes.
But the idea here is look what happened to Chick-fil-A that day. People didn't boycott the place. It actually increased business, and the lines were around the building, around the corners for this.
Yeah, and so as I know, it being involved in politics, there are certain types of talk about food.
Yes.
There's restaurants that sort of represent certain things, and when you find out, like Chick-fil-A is a restaurant that Republicans seem to sort of cherish, and then there's restaurants on the other side as well, which is but it is what it is. And so when you are displaying some consciousness about a particular stance one way or the other, if you understand who your client base is, and that's something we got to think about it. Some of these businesses are not just doing this randomly.
Yes. Yeah.
They're being very strategic about it. And so that's what I want you, audience, to think about before we start going out there and communicate about certain things.
That's right.
Who am I communicating to?
Yep.
Who is my base? What might they think? And those kinds of things.
And what's really my message? And I think Sean has said something here. It says here, as Americans, we have the freedom of speech, but not the freedom from the consequences of our speech. And he also says we should choose our words and position them wisely.
So and there's consequences to some of this stuff here.
Oh, absolutely.
And so that takes me down to number three.
Okay.
And this is the third reason why running your mouth about politics can improve your business, career, and negotiation. And number 3 is it displays courage and honesty, which can foster more courage and honesty from others in a negotiation, in your business, or on a job.
Yeah.
So there is something about when a person just comes out and communicates a position, and they're coming straight from their heart, and they're being honest, and they're not trying to destroy or cause someone to go down. They're speaking because they're trying to uplift in one way or the other.
Yeah.
And when that happens, even if someone may disagree at times, what can happen is it causes someone else to say, okay, I hear your position. I know it might be different from mine, but I respect the fact that you are being transparent,
Yes.
and you are communicating openly with me.
Yes.
And when we display that type of courage, that at times can foster others to display courage and honesty. And that is a way where we can somehow resolve certain issues.
Well, exactly. And I think we all know America it loves the underdog.
Yeah.
And so if the status quo says we're X and this one lone person stands up as Y and challenges it, at the end of the day, if that person does it with dignity, they do it with empathy, they do it with humility, you get to a place where you say, well, you know, it's kind of hard for me to disagree with what he's saying. Like, it's kind of hard to disagree with what Martin Luther King Jr. was saying about civil rights. I mean, how could you really say he was completely wrong about that? So when someone stands up like that, knowing how we are, we love the underdog. Most movies are written from that perspective of, here's the protagonist that's going to have to meet the antagonist, to which then the antagonist is going to get the better hand of him. But by the end of the movie, the protagonist is going to learn just enough stuff to overcome that antagonist. And that's almost every movie. That's Star Wars. That's Indiana Jones. And
he loves Star Wars.
That stuff.
He's always talking about Star Wars.
I'm always going to quote that, yeah, because it's our common bond in some kind of way, right? But that's the point, though, and that's what you see. So yes, that's that third point. We love the unsung hero. We love that person who stands up and defies, even though everybody else is trying to tell them they're wrong.
Yes.
And then if they actually have a really good point, now look what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so, with that being said, all of these topics, the points that have been made here, I have 2 things, and you probably have some others as well, because we're wrapping up here. We have about 5 more minutes left in our show here.
You guys have to get back to work. So we understand. My battery's getting a little low too. But.
Yeah. So two things. If you're deciding you're going to speak out, and I am not opposed to you doing so, and you should not be opposed to do it, and especially with the 4th of July tomorrow and everything, this is a time where we need to cherish, our freedom and everything else. But what I would say is you need to assess whether or not you can afford or not afford to speak out about a subject matter. And so there are times when, thinking about always your pocketbook, and I understand that, can cause you to say, hey, I'm not going to communicate about this because this could hurt my business. But there might be some moments where there are things that go above just thinking about your pocketbook. And there's rights and things that are so central to who we are as people that you might have an obligation to speak out.
That's true, and I think it's conscientiousness, right? Because that's what it is. It's a long-standing pattern that says I will do the right thing, and hopefully we understand what that right thing is.
Yes.
And usually, I think all of us have that default set inside of us. We know that it's wrong to walk up and just punch somebody in the face. We know that that's wrong. We don't have to read a book.
Hopefully nobody's punching anybody in the face.
Right? Because people do this, though, with words. They're verbally abusive to people.
Yeah.
And that's why we see the vitriol, and people are trying to find ways to cut people down. But what I would say is that when we're really looking at this, when you're able to be winsome, whenever you're able to actually prove a case and do it without this anger, but it still has passion.
Did you say
that
winsome?
Also says, yes, winsome. Yeah, that's right. That's a word we're going to make. It's winsome, right? And when the other person says, you know what, I was going to start off by hating everything you were going to stand for, but really, I can appreciate the human that's speaking.
Okay.
And that's what pulls us all together in terms of solidarity. Because at the end of the day, we have a lot of the same exact needs. We need to be loved. We need people to love. We want to all grow. We want to be better. We want to be better than we were yesterday.
That's right.
Every day you have to ask yourself, what kind of professional am I going to be today? There's no one waking up today saying, I want to be the worst possible human being I could possibly be. So if that's true,
That's right.
but the person just happens to be on the other side of the conversation, then maybe we just look at it because maybe what they're offering is just a different perspective, not necessarily an argument that somebody's wrong. So we should want to look at different perspectives because that's actually how we learn.
And one comment we got here is that there's a gray line to this. All I would say is you better be right. You are rolling the dice if you take a stance.
That's true, though. That's fair.
Yeah. And then Lenora is saying, I agree. There are some things on which we cannot be silent. And so we now are, of course, in a moment in time where we have several different movements going on that are extremely important and are taking our consciousness and our country to newer, higher levels and opening the doors up for people. The Me Too movement.
Yes.
Also just issues related to police brutality.
Yes.
All these various topics that are controversial that people are standing up and speaking about. Back to my question is, can you afford not to speak or not to? Can you speak or not to speak? And so that's the kind of thing we got to think about.
Welcome, Ed.
Yeah, and this country is one in which we have a freedom of speech that we have to be careful about, as some have talked.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have an obligation to speak up. And so that's something we have to wrestle with. The last thing, and we have a few more minutes left here. 2 minutes left. 2 minutes left here.
Folks.
It's who's your client base and what do they think? We may not know who they are or what they may be thinking, but that's something you have to think about when you do speak out. And again, you have to weigh things.
Yes.
But I want to thank everybody for joining us today.
Yes.
This is our 6th or 7th episode of this.
This is 7th, and this is going to be recorded. So if you missed this live and you just joined in, there will be a recording that we will be posting, and you'll see it in the Boston Negotiator School on PJ Dunn TV and on LinkedIn as well. So we will put this up if you missed it.
Yes, and so if you enjoyed this and you want to see more of this, and you have another topic you want us to discuss, please send that in, and we're going to be going through the comments.
Yep.
We appreciate your likes.
Yes.
And we appreciate you joining us today. And hey, we want you to enjoy your 4th. And so this is Steve Bolden, PJ Dunn, Ask a Deal Lawyer, Ask an Executive Coach, and enjoy July 4th. Eat some barbecue. Hey, and everybody has a right to eat. So let people eat. Oh my God, let people eat.